Parenting, manliness, marriage, fitness, and finance. Nothing's off limits.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us this evening for an episode of the Surf and Turf Show. So, Adam, you are clearly not at home station tonight. You're in the jump talk. What's going on, man? Where are you?
Yes, I am. I'm coming to you from a ladies' bathroom. I'm at a.
You gotta explain that one a little bit. I gotta
I'm
call
at
the
a.
cops.
I am at a men's retreat at a lodge, and there are no ladies here, so this room is not getting any use, and I don't have internet in my room, so henceforth I am in a ladies' bathroom, and the
How great.
acoustics sound decent in here.
They're all right. Quality's a little off in terms of bandwidth, but I don't know if you're in a non-internet space. Now, how does the bathroom have internet, but your room doesn't? Like, how we get there?
So because it's close to the router for the lodge.
That
My
makes
room
sense.
is not. Yeah.
Got it. That makes sense. Well, that wood paneling probably has excellent wireless
The
transmission.
acoustic, yeah. I feel like I'm in a time machine back to an earlier age of America. It's
Dude,
beautiful.
you kind of look like you're getting ready to hop a train or maybe go whaling. I'm not sure which, but
Yes,
you're a Navy
it's
dude. Maybe
it's
that's possible.
so it could be either or at this point, or I could be about to become a cat burglar.
I
There
can
are
see it.
several possibilities.
So,
Yeah,
villain from a Home Alone movie or extra from a remake of Moby
yes,
Dick. Okay,
correct.
solid.
Absolutely. I could be like I'm one of the ones that gets taken out early. I'm like a red shirt. Yeah.
Red shirt whaler. It's
Yes.
funny, man. I had to do training. We put together an exercise in Norway about a year ago, which is we're talking about whaling. This is relevant only because of that. Um, it is the one place I've ever been on the planet where whaling is still seen as both like a legitimate and kind of noble pastime. Like there's a statue of a
Hmm.
whaler. The people are straight faced, like, well, yeah, we kill whales. Whales eat fish. If we let the whales eat all the fish, there wouldn't be any fish, and so we eat the whales. They just say it in such a way that is so disconnected from guy who grew up watching Star Trek 4 and thinking that killing a
Yes,
whale would
and
be
we
like
eat
the
it.
worst thing you could do. These guys, well,
Yes.
yeah, of course we eat whales. Why wouldn't you eat whales? They're just big old kind of fishy things, and it's got whale on the menu. You could order whale. I I felt
Yeah.
I feel like I would feel bad. It must just be a symptom of our generation. I would feel really guilty if I ate a whale. I don't know. I think I've just been trained that they're somehow better than me or something, so I'm not supposed to eat them.
I no, I think it is our generation because there were big like Greenpeace movements and then Star Trek. Yes, we need the whales to communicate with an alien that's going to destroy the planet. So
It's the
absolutely.
only and how much of that humor from those just totally went over your head. Like I did not get that Chekhov has a Russian accent, and that's why the Navy base was so upset. Like I didn't understand. Like oh, it's the Cold War. Yeah, of course they're upset
Right.
that the Russian is asking about nuclear weapons, but totally just flew past my 8-year-old head. Like totally lost. Sorry, writers, you didn't aim that one at my
Yeah,
demographic.
I bet your parents got that though. They
I'm
got
sure
the
they did.
reference.
If they were even in
Yeah.
the theater, they probably just let me go see that while they went to dinner or something. Like
Don't get kidnapped.
Uh, yeah, that was the bumper sticker of the 80s. Don't get kidnapped, kids, because it won't be cool. Um, anyway, so we're obviously off schedule today. It's nighttime, so the quality of our conversation may be reduced, but I think we're just going to have to roll with that.
This is
Um,
surf and turf after dark.
that's true. There it is. It's the second shift, or the lower
Yes.
decks, or I don't know. You go wherever you want with it, I guess. But man, I had a travel week too. I'm back home now, but as we talked about last week, I had spent a week traveling with the family, and I was thinking about making good decisions all week because obviously the first thing when you're on a trip with the family is, did I make a bad decision in being on this trip? Like, and there's strong possibility you did, right? It's over now, so we can all talk about it happily. And all jokes aside, it went pretty well. But I had an interesting vignette happen while I was there. Um, that is very related to decision making. I just thought I would love to just kick us off with this today. So I'm sitting there. We're having dinner with it's a bunch of people we met in Texas, and a couple of the people just start talking about this situation that arose in their neighborhood. And one of them called it the deer war. And of course, I'm sitting there just having dinner. I'm like, the deer war. What the hell's a deer war? What are we talking about tonight? A deer war. He's like, well, the deer war. The deer war started because one neighbor, this is an HOA neighborhood, so one neighbor wishes to feed the deer and to have the deer come into the yard. So there's naturally that expands wildly in Texas. There's so many deer in Texas, and you end up with 100 deer in the yard every morning, just like eating and doing deer things. Other neighbor gets mad, doesn't want the deer in the yard, says, well, you shouldn't be feeding the deer corn. Somehow, and this is the part where it gets crazy. That's a normal dispute. You would imagine most people would, okay, let's figure out a way around this. You like deer, I don't like deer. We could probably find an amicable way to swap this. Oh no. Oh no. This escalated wildly. This escalated to now every morning, one of the people is out at 4 a.m. with an air horn in the neighborhood, chasing the deer away. Air horn. So, crowded neighborhood, chasing the deer away with air horn and bright flashing lights. Other neighbors' retaliation, shout at the person at 4 a.m, spray them with the garden hose. Spray them with the garden hose. And this has gone on, this tit for tat. So we've gotten the sheriff involved. We've gotten the HOA involved. People getting fined $500 a day for this. It still continues. And it just, I was thinking all week, all weekend while I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, I'm about to talk about decision making. We're about to talk about how we think that good decision making is a quality that humans and, the dudes that we're trying to create and be should possess. And I couldn't help but think, essentially I think these are rational people, but how do you sometimes get into this place where you've made, I imagine a series of decisions that made sort of sense to you at some point, but you end up in a place that it makes no sense. And what is that? What do you think? How do you dissect the situation? Is it a reasonable situation? Is any of that reasonable? Am I off?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So I think, as you noted, there was probably chances to take off ramps from the scenario. Like they could, like, hey, let's come to some sort of accord here. And I don't know how much. Yeah, and I don't know how much they actually talked, but I think a frontal approach is just a recipe for disaster. I think every time I take a frontal approach, and I still do them all the time, like stupidly. It just ends up, it's not good. So that would be like,
direct
hey, Dan,
conflict, right?
Yeah,
direct.
like, hey, Dan, you dummy. We don't need deer here. Like, don't do it anymore. You're stupid. That
doesn't work for you? That's not an approach that goes well for you?
Shockingly, that approach, the success rate of that approach is not high. So
you're blowing my mind.
I think finding a way to like obliquely attack it would be the best bet. So it'd be like, hey, let's go hit a round of golf. Let's go. Oh, go for a walk. Let's catch up. And then it's like talking, building rapport, building connection. And then, hey man, listen, do you think we could talk real quick about the deer? Listen, I'm definitely afraid that my dog is going to get ticks, and those things bring ticks.
Do you think that's so good? That's so plausible.
You think you could help me out with this?
That's so plausible, right? What a great solution. Even in this 4 seconds of like, Drew Carey style improv, you've managed to create a better solution than air horn at 4 a.m, which is, I think, personally, like the worst solution you can come up with. I guess it does make the
no one wins. No one is winning with the air horn.
It's mutually assured destruction. We have all lost. Everything has gone to hell. But I feel like what you're talking about, like this, hey, okay, so this direct approach, I think a lot of times it comes to our minds as the first thing we should do is just confront it, right? Confront the problem, say exactly what you're thinking in toto, and then it'll be fine, right? Because honestly, that's kind of a traditionally masculine way to handle a problem, right? Like that is what you see in a lot of movies. You see a lot of that, like, well, I'm going to confront this just head to head, right? You just face it down and you win. But maybe that's not always the best way. Maybe there's a balance there. Maybe there's something a little more, I don't know, rational. Is rational the right word? Maybe it's not.
So I think, and what we're seeking is, you've got passivity, like you're just too passive. You're not going to talk about it. You're just going to be mad. And then you got super aggressive, nuclear option. And like what we're going for the Goldilocks. We're going for the middle position between, so you're assertive basically. And you can be assertive, while being respectful, and you're just, and if at first, you're not going to see eye to eye, like you kind of continue talking about it and try to understand it from their, perspective. His wife has cancer. She loves seeing the deer in the morning. Like, I don't know if there's some, who knows, right?
There could be more to it. There could be more to it.
Yeah. Right. So I think like trying to, that's like the old negotiation tactic. Like, look at the, the interest behind the position, like what's going on there, and try to see maybe there's a way we can come to something mutually beneficial.
That makes sense. Yeah, I could see that. Now, one, Goldilocks, I got to disagree on the calling it the Goldilocks approach. Like, Goldilocks is a thief
Yeah,
who should have
I
been eaten
forgot.
by the bears.
I forgot that
It's
this
loaded.
was a trigger for you. I apologize.
It's true. Oh, there's some stories I've had to read so many times as a parent that I just can't handle them. Like, I don't like the lesson this is teaching. If you break into people's houses, then, they'll be fine with it. Like, that's not the message I wish my kids to get. Goldilocks always gets eaten in the version that I read. So it's unfortunate. But let's pick another one. I don't know. Any other
Okay.
sort of middle ground. How
Okay.
about the golden mean?
Well,
Let's pick the
the
golden mean.
golden mean.
The
Yeah,
golden
the
mean.
golden mean.
No Aristotle problems. Got no problems with Aristotle. I think he wasn't a
No,
thief. He doesn't need to get eaten by bears.
he was not a thief. Yeah, he did educate Alexander the Great, but we can kind of like put that to the side here.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what kind of responsibility teachers necessarily bear. I feel that probably Aristotle didn't impart whatever it was about Alexander the Great that gave him the need to conquer the world. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't really get that at Aristotle myself, though. I think probably it wasn't the case. I don't
I
know.
think what we've been talking about with our kids, I think they're a lot of those traits are just kind of baked in. So you're right. Probably Alexander, he was going to conquer the world no matter what. Maybe he got a little more wisdom along the way with Aristotle. Who knows?
We should hope, right? Actually, I've just been reading. Have you ever read a book called Mythos?
No, but I have it. It's on my bookshelf. It's is that Stephen somebody British guy?
It's a British guy who does like audiobooks and stuff. He's supposed to be really amazing. I haven't heard any of
Yeah.
his books, but one of the a place where I go for breakfast, the lady who Melissa, she's the one that gives me breakfast a couple times a week, and you have to read this. It's the best telling of Greek mythology I've ever read. And honestly, like I've read a ton of mythology in my day. I read a ton of it growing up. I did a bunch of it in college, and it is amazing. He is a phenomenal
Ooh.
storyteller, and he tells a lot of, I guess, different takes on a lot of the stories and kind of a lot of deeper versions of them that I had never heard. And I was just super impressed with it. But it got me thinking because, obviously we're talking about consequences of decisions, and the Greeks just love that. Like, there's no Greek story that doesn't end with you thought you were doing, I got you. Oh, now you're going to
Yeah.
push a rock up a hill for the rest of eternity. Like, oh, no, didn't see that
You
coming.
forgot to put the white sheets on the ship sailing into harbor.
It
Put the
gotcha.
black ones in, and I threw myself to my death. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and they were so touchy. Like I don't know if
Yeah.
I mean I've been to Greece. I've never known modern Greek people to be quite so touchy. But man, you
Mhm.
insult one of those Greek gods, they would kill all of your family. Like whoa, well, that escalated.
It
It's like
will.
we talk about the deer wars. Like it escalated rather
Mm.
quickly. No air horns though. We're just gonna smite
Yeah.
you with holy arrows. Good lord. So
It's a nuclear. Yeah.
it is
I
lesson one.
was
Don't be Greek. I guess.
I was no, I was thinking of the Money Pit, and then the War of the Roses, for like when you were describing the Deer Wars. Just like you're locked into this cycle of combat. Like, and you have like honor, you have like your values are on the line, and it's hard to withdraw from that without feeling like a big failure, right? Like, and so it's hard to you got to kind of give people like a little face saving at times to get them out of the situation.
Well, yeah, it's like the Pashtun Wali. I mean, how many problems did you have on your various trips to Afghanistan just because of the kind of ancient code of the Pashtun people that was fairly rigid and in a lot of ways really well documented, but to us seemed maybe a little like kind of bloody and heavy-handed. But I mean, in a lot of ways, it gave you kind of outs to solve these problems. I don't know if they have anything that covers deer. I'm not sure. I didn't never come up with that one, or I never
It could
encountered
be a
that.
multi generational blood feud from deer.
They could.
It's
It is
possible.
likely that all of those families would be dead right now if this had occurred in Afghanistan. So it's good that it didn't. I guess small blessings.
Well, and that brings up like the mountain cultures versus kind of like the valley. The more like a fishing culture, like an agricultural culture, like, and so the mountain culture is like their reputation is everything. So if they back down, if they show weakness, then there's their wasta, right? Like their street cred is going down, and so that's part of every calculation they make.
Now is that geographical? I this is the first time I've heard this. Is that like a
Yeah.
cross-cutting
So
thing?
Yeah, so if you look at like the Scots, like the Scottish,
Okay.
when they were,
Highlands, Lowlands.
yeah, Highlands, like mountain culture, like so they were in mountains in Scotland, and then like here, in America, in like West Virginia. So it's um, there's a lot of like emphasis on like individual autonomy, risk taking, winning glory at the individual level, for yourself and then for your clan. And that's in there's a lot of like kind of individualism. It's like on you to like make your reputation versus like the valley, the fishing communities. They're more like collaboration based because just by nature of like the situation, they have to be collaborative to harvest the crops, get the fish in. So it's just a different. The incentive structure of the environment is different.
Interesting. But you end up with these same kind of, I guess, to bring it back to the topic of the day, you end up with these different decision making metrics, basically calculi, the different mechanisms by which your decisions are making. Well, let's pick them apart a little bit. I mean, we're talking decision making, so I think in my head when I think of decision making, I think of kind of passion driven decision making and kind of more reason driven decision making. And I wouldn't say that either is 100% the right or wrong, but obviously we see people kind of veer off in one direction or the other. But I mean, is that a valid metric? I mean, in my own head, I think, well, I'm either being emotional with
Yes,
this
I
or I'm kind of
think
being reasonable.
I'm definitely curious where this goes with you and I because like I think I have a little bit of different like take on this because I think if you look at people like Antonio Damasio, he's either a psychologist or a neuroscientist, but he researches people with brain injuries. And what he found was when some of their emotional centers were impacted, like they've lost the use of them, people could not make a decision, even like a simple decision like what to have for lunch. And so there's a component of emotionality to our decisions, even when we think that they're rational. So I think what you're saying is like, can we get the kind of just the facts? Let's pull back. Let's try to be unbiased and come to a decision that way. I think there is like a lot of wisdom to that perspective, but and I think when you're saying emotional, you're thinking like you're just reacting to something. Is that what you're kind of
Or
getting at?
like driven by passion. Like it's more of a want, more of something that I want this. I want this to happen or I feel that this should happen as opposed to,
Mhm.
well, there's, if I step back, good reason for this to happen. This makes the most sense given all the different factors. And I honestly, as I tried to pick this apart, because at first it was like, well, it seems pretty, it seems pretty binary. But as I started to pick apart, I think you're right. There's always a component of both, and in any decision we make, I think that the most like impulsive, I want this because I want it kind of decision. I think most people will tend to at least create some sort of architecture for that making sense in their heads. Like most people will at least justify, even if there's truly no reason, you would at least probably try to talk yourself into it. And on the other side, there's got to be at least a little bit of, I just want this to happen. That's behind kind of some of that. I could be wrong though. I mean, am I way off?
No, no, absolutely not. So, I mean, I think it's helpful for me. Like you can look at it like head, heart, gut. Like those three different kind of
You mentioned that last week.
metrics. And so, it could be like, hey, my gut is thinking, don't trust this, or don't sign the deal, whatever it is. But my heart really wants it. And you're absolutely right. Like we have to be very wary of that because we can be very delusional. Like all of us can, myself included. We can just get very deluded about what we think we can do or what's happening. That's why humility is important. But yes, I mean, I think there's probably a domain for, passion-based decision making than a more of a domain for like, just strict rationality. But at the end of the day, like you would like both those things to be in alignment and synchronized as you're making decisions.
No, I think you're right on that. I think that's really what we're looking for. And actually, I couldn't find a way to clearly break this down into masculine or feminine or in anything that's really different on the, I guess, male decision making side from the female decision. To me, this is actually pretty clear that I don't know, just everybody makes decisions about this way to a greater or lesser degree. I thought of so many cases of women who were like super hyper rational and guys that I knew that particularly in the team worlds that have been like, let's say hyper emotional in their decision making, very impulsive. And so I don't think any of the old stereotypes that you might associate with it are actually play out. I think this is pretty much across the board sex neutral. I don't know. What do you think?
So yeah, I think the exception would be so that the book I did a review on, The Hour Between Dog and Wolf. The guy looked at testosterone and the impact on trading, and he found that when you get a successful trade or you get a victory, you get this big dose of testosterone, and then that kind of leads you to take riskier decisions, to get more gains, into like a vicious type of cycle. And the women that he, like the female traders that he studied, didn't evaluate risk the same way. They had like better like long-term performance with their portfolio decisions, and they avoided some of the like testosterone traps that like the male traders got into.
So is that serious? Is it similar with gambling? I mean, is it like a dopamine kind of response where a success
Yes.
generates kind of this addictive response where you just want more success? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yes. So, and like they'll measure, they measure gorillas and humans, and they see, so if you and I are competing and you win, you're going to get a jolt of testosterone. I'm going to like, mine is going to like go down because I'm like defeated.
Is that like neutral to who the audience is? Like I beat my kids at Candyland pretty regularly. I think I'm pretty good at Candyland, but I don't think I get a testosterone hit out of beating my 8-year-old at it. I mean, what do you think? Is that
It's
there's got to be
possible. I
something
mean,
there's got to be something to competition there, or is it just I could just line up people who I'm much better than and beat them and get just jolts of massive
I mean,
testosterone?
we could do a science experiment and see if this happens.
This sounds like
Uh,
a really dumb
it's,
experiment. I would love to take a part in
yes, listen,
this.
we have the technology. We can do this.
That's, oh my gosh. See, this is the kind of decision we should avoid. We're talking about good decision making and we're walking ourselves into a stupid decision right in the middle of the conversation. Like, is this,
Listen, we are trying to do a case study. All right, this is good.
oh
This is
my
good.
gosh, this is somebody's thesis at NPS right now. We are just writing the thesis right now. Oh man.
Perfect.
So a part of this, we haven't like head hard gut. I like that kind of tripolar approach makes sense. I mean, intuitively, I guess I can see that probably I make decisions that way. Now, is there a sweet spot, or is actually what do you think? Does it sit right in the middle of that, or is it actually nah? You probably want to go with your heart or your gut a little less. What's the right answer? Or is there a right answer? Is this just truly different for every person?
I think you have to understand like the domain that or, the context that the decision is being made in, because I think that would determine a lot of it. If you're thinking about like picking a spouse, like that's a crazy decision. Like that's like a very important decision that like you have to evaluate on all different metrics, and that's probably like a three. The tripolar is aligned in that decision, and that probably takes time. That takes like getting to know the pros and cons, and then being able to like view get a lot more contextual information. So it's probably like I don't know, is this like an army saying develop the situation? Is that army?
Yeah, to develop a situation, absolutely.
Okay.
Or to let the situation develop. Sometimes that just means wait and
Yeah.
let it kind of play out a little bit to see how it's going to go before you pull the trigger on a decision. Is it kind of how you
Uh,
mean it?
yeah, exactly. So like, if it's like a spouse decision, you're like, okay, we get a pet, we're like growing plants, we're going on trips together. So you're trying to see the other person more fully. And so like that kind of decision
So
is
you
like
live
a
in a
super.
'90s romantic movie. You live in a '90s like Sleepless in Seattle.
Yes.
That's what you live in. That's what you're suggesting. Right? Go
So
ahead.
yes, and both friend groups are trying to break them up. So that's another part of this scenario. But so there's a time and place for that, and then I think, but you and I were military officers. Like there's that whole like bias for action, be decisive.
For sure.
You got to make like an 80% decision. You can't wait for more information. So some of that's probably like intuitive. Like I think of Tom Brady, and he'll talk about his. I'm not a super Tom Brady fan, but I like respect like how he played, and he would say like he would do so much research, he would watch so much tape that like he knew when dudes are lining up exactly what was going to happen. So his like processing speed, he was able to like bring that down to like he's throwing the ball like in a second, a second and a half, because of his like excessive preparation to make intuitive reads. So I
Okay.
think we develop that as leaders through training and through experience. So that's probably like on the intuitive side, and then the deliberate. You're just maybe doing. I think even when you make calculations, like if you're like trying to buy a car and you're like, okay, gas mileage cost, resale, safety, you're still going to kind of like there's going to be an emotional component to that decision.
No, I don't think you're wrong. I think a lot of times we might make up reasons to justify what we want to do anyway. But I want to go back a little bit because what you're saying,
Yeah.
the Tom Brady approach. I mean, that makes sense. We're talking a combination of kind of muscle memory and just
Mm.
sort of inculcated knowledge, right? I mean, obviously, in any kind of close quarters battle training, that's a huge aspect of it. You have to just do it a million times so that it becomes reflexive. You know where everybody around you is going to go because you've all trained together, and so you can make decisions that would normally require a tremendous amount of data to be put into your brain and then processed. You can make them instantly because you know so many of the variables. You've already solved so many of them through training that it simplifies the equation, right? And that's I think what Tom Brady's describing is just okay. Well, I just need to go ahead and solve for all of these other variables so that I can isolate that one decision that I got to make. In his case, receivers and ours, do you pull the trigger? Do you not pull the trigger? I can make that quickly, and that can have my entire focus. And that See, it's funny when I think about that. It makes perfect sense, and obviously we've both been trained to do that a lot. Um, but in my head, if I step back and walked into this episode and was like, "Well, what is the ideal decision making?" I think in my head, I tend to think that it's more data driven, and like, well, it should be data driven, and you should do this. But I think we live in a time when data is almost like paralyzing people. I feel that we have so much data that actually I need to move, and your little tripolar thing, I need to move kind of away from head a little bit. I think the average person's decision making should move a little bit away from head. And I feel kind of silly saying that, but at the same time, it can be so easy to research yourself into paralysis. Like we were talking about earlier with the spouse. We were like, okay, well, let's get a dog, let's get a plant, let's experiment with these things, let's get to know each other. You If you don't just pull the trigger and commit and then kind of walk yourself into a situation where okay, well, we're married now and we found out some things that we didn't know about each other, but now we're in it, and so we really got to make it work. I think you can almost talk yourself out of the decisions you want to make by getting too wrapped up in the data. So what do you think about that? Does that make sense? Am I saying be dumb, don't think? I don't think that's what I'm saying, but it kind of might be sounds that way.
No, I mean, I think yeah, I definitely agree. We're drowning in information, and I just finished this book, Technopoly, by was it Neil Postman? Anyways, he was like a big cultural critic in the '90s, but like Technopoly is just very prescient, I would say. Like it was written in like '92, and it's like it's describing today to a T this like technological world where content is everything, and we're just drowning in data, and we can't make sense of it. So I think there are. This is why we have like rules of thumb and heuristics. Like Michael Pollan, I think, did he do Omnivore's Dilemma?
I
Anyways,
read
like
it.
he
I
had
couldn't tell
like
you did.
he had like eat mostly plants, not too much, and then he had like a third. He had a third one, but it was like these very simple heuristics that you can because you can look at you can nuke a topic as you said, and so if you can just get like what is like 85% solution in this domain, and then execute that because like that other 15% was going to take so much effort to get to.
So that's that kind of law of diminishing returns with information acquisition. I think I think that jives with the way I see things too. I think that kind of clicks with the way I do things. You see it all the time though. You see people that paralyze themselves trying to pursue this kind of perfect answer. I worked over in Europe when the whole Ukraine situation was building up, and you saw that all the time in kind of senior leadership with the DoD over there at that time. And I don't want to throw them under the bus for whatever decisions made because that's what I'm trying to do. You see it in Afghanistan just the same. When I was sitting in the JOC in 2019, you see people who would come to the end of a meeting when the boss is supposed to make a good decision, and he's been presented this kind of distilled expertise from a really broad range of experts, pretty much all the data you could ever want, but there's just some things missing. You're like, well, let's table it for next week. I need to know a little more about this. I need to get a little more right here. I want to know kind of a little more about this. When everybody in the room is just screaming, we've poured 150 hours into this. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing else you could know. And by the way, all of this that we just distilled, honestly, you could have probably read like 3 Wikipedia articles and you would have known enough about the overall situation to make a
Mm-hmm.
fair guess about how things are going to play out. So just make a decision. And that that I think happens a lot. I think you see people do it with car research. People will do it with dating profiles online. You'll do it with there's so many things where you can just get so wrapped up in the details and just I need this and this and I need to know a little more here. What if I didn't know this? That you just miss all the opportunities. So it makes me want to move away. It makes me want to move away from data and a move away from kind of more intellectual decision making. Even though again, I hate to say it. I mean I majored in logic in school. Like I feel that is an intelligent way to make decisions. But when you're just buried in data, you almost have to just shut most of it out.
Well, yeah. So I'm a huge fan of Ian McGilchrist, and he has a hypothesis about the brain hemispheres and what they do, and it's fundamentally about like different types of attention. So what he's in his work is buttressed by like literally thousands of studies of patients that have lost the use of one hemisphere, right? And they image it, and they're able to see the differences. So in general, the left hemisphere is about very focused, fine attention on like one thing, and with a design to exploit and kind of take advantage of that thing. You know, like you're hunting for food, and there's like food on that tree. There's an apple. I'm going to grab it. And that's contrasted with the right hemisphere, which is a more like wide band general awareness of the environment, and a more holistic understanding of what's happening. So this other guy, Jonathan Rowson, he has like what's called the McGilchrist maneuver, and what that is like you initially start with the right hemisphere. You're looking at the problem holistically. You go to the left hemisphere to analyze something down, and then you zoom back out to the right hemisphere and then make the decision holistically. So it sounds like, you know, in the example you gave, the general is like just stuck in the left hemisphere, which is actually McGilchrist's like thesis for most of like the Western world today. They're overly consumed with like abstracting and analyzing and exploiting, and reducing, rather than looking at like the holistic situation and making kind of a decision with like the wisdom of informed by your emotion and your gut.
So I've heard obviously the left right brain divide before, but I've never heard it described that way. But what you're saying makes sense. Like intuitively, when you look around at kind of the Western world today, that's what it feels like. It feels like we've gotten so in love with kind of the model of the expert. But the way you become an expert, like my wife, she works on her PhD. I mean, the way you become an expert is to become a mile deep in something. Like the idea that you would kind of broaden out and become broadly proficient in a bunch of different fields doesn't get you terribly far in kind of the credentialing world. So whether you're going to be a doctor, or you're just going to kind of wicker down and specialize with your scientist, same kind of thing, engineer, same kind of thing. And so it seems that we almost have this favor, or I guess prejudice toward the deep specialization, because it carries with it a level of credibility that being a generalist doesn't. But it does feel sometimes like the generalist in the world right now is totally lacking. The guy that can skip between the three disciplines and say, hey, a little of you, a little you, let's pull those together. Maybe that's where like political leaders are supposed to be. I don't know. Maybe that's their role. I'm not sure where you're supposed to find that.
Yeah.
But in an office, it would be the management, right? Obviously, the management should be the people pulling that together. In the military, in theory, it should be the same. I mean, he is the ODA commander. I should take the commo guy and the engineer and the weapons sergeant. We should pool their expertise and then make a broad decision, because I'm not as deep as them. But I think we do favor the kind of specialist left brain that you're talking about right now, and to our detriment, right? I mean, to our detriment.
Yeah, and so, and you know, the cliche about the PhD is like, you know, you keep fine tuning in until you know like more and more about less and less, until you know everything about nothing.
Yep.
And so that so yes, and then experts today have like replaced like the priests. So we expect like the experts to give us the received wisdom, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to bag on experts. Like we need experts. Like it's important to have experts, but you're absolutely right that that expertise needs to be situated within like a larger wisdom, like decision making, like a holistic decision making, And so I'm all about, I mean, my Substack's called Renaissance Humans. Like I'm all about like, the
Right.
polymath, like striving to be a generalist because I believe like this world today needs generalists more than ever. We're not going to be able to solve all of the interconnected problems unless we have generalists that are able to like make connections across domains.
No, I think you're 100% correct with that. I think, yeah, I mean, obviously your Substack is called Renaissance Humans, and that's good, man. It's got some really good stuff in it. You put a ton of research into that thing, that stuff I would never read about, and then I read about your Substack, like, man, I got to go check that out. But that is funny, but I think a lot of what you're saying about people going to an expert for basically the wrong opinion, it stems from kind of a logical fallacy, and it happens all the time. Like if you're a smart person and I go ask you about something, well, he's a smart guy, he knows a lot about stuff, he probably knows a lot about other stuff too, and that leap right there can get you in trouble, right? Because you can go ask somebody that is as deep an expert into how something works or how I should do something as you could possibly be. I can go ask an architect how to build a house, but the architect can never answer the why, right? I mean, or the purpose.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we often make that fallacy of assuming that whatever you thought, this kind of priestly function or the religion's function is supposed to give you kind of this purpose in life, whatever flavor of that you believe, that's where you go to find the whys and the purposes. But people really have kind of shied away from a lot of that and kind of, written it off as kind of hooey. And instead we're going to go over and talk to the how people and ask them the same questions, like, well, why should I do this? And you see it a lot. I see it a lot reading kind of higher end science. I get kind of the feel that you start to get into a little bit of, well, this is the purpose, this is the why behind it. But I really feel that we're kind of edging into mysticism there, and you're almost stepping outside of kind of that realm. I don't know. That's my
So
interpretation.
yeah, and what I wrote last week was about getting stuck in a cul-de-sac, and that was like because I was like reading like Bacon and Descartes and all these like dudes that like made amazing discoveries, and we had this miraculous modern world. But what they did was like there's no like value built into the scientific method. So like if we're gonna find
Mm-hmm.
like meaning, it can't be found in the scientific method. And then like it's a wondrous tool for like discovering more about reality, but like it's got limitations. So like we have to understand that. And when we try to live our life by, scientism, like, kind of the worship of experts and science, then we're going to run into trouble. So like there has to be like kind of values that are guiding that science.
No, 100%. And you see this quickly get painted into, well, you don't believe in science. Like, well, no, that's not it at all. It's just I believe that the
Yeah.
scientific method it's a constrained tool, necessarily so. It's amazing at what it does. It's amazing at saying, I see a thing. How do I evaluate whether that thing is repeatable and true? Okay, well, I need to test. And so I test. I form a hypothesis, and then I create an experiment that tests the hypothesis, and then I execute that experiment a number of times, or I get other people to execute that experiment a number of times. I see if my hypothesis is true or false, and then I'm sorry, not true or false. I see if my hypothesis has been disproved, right? Because that's
Yeah.
another huge part of it is like everything can be disproved. There's actually nothing that can't be potentially disproved. And that's such a wise and thoughtful piece of the tool that was baked
Yeah.
in. Like, no, there's no such thing as a true statement.
Right.
It's just something that's been proven right every time that we've tried it. It can immediately be discredited if somebody convincingly conducts an experiment that proves it wrong. And I just hate seeing it get misused because then it does start to discredit it. And people are like, well, you can't trust it. Like, no, you should be able to trust it. It's rock solid for what it's for. It just doesn't do
Right.
other things. And I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's got to be the science has to be used in service of the greater good, the more holistic good, and if it's just pursued in a specialized niche, it's going to start causing problems in other areas.
No, that makes sense. Well, let's circle all this back to our decision making. So now we're talking about how to make good decisions, and we're like, okay, well, sometimes you've got this kind of science-based approach, and let's call it empirical studies, right? You're going to go out and look at things, and you're going to make determinations about those things, and you use that to drive your decisions. And other times, you're not, because you know that that's not going to be a tool that's going to work. So what do you turn to? Because I feel like now we're moving over toward like the heart and gut side of your trio. But what guides that side of it? If not the sort of head, eyes, empirical focus of science, then what do we use on the other side that's not reason?
Yeah, so let me back up to Um, yeah, I think looking at domains is like helpful. So David Snowden, he came up with a Cynefin model, which is like Cynefin, but it's just pronounced Cynefin. And what that does is like look at, what are the domains? Simple, complicated, complex, chaotic. And I think he created some different ones, but like the point is like, if something's complicated, you can like it's still repeatable and like replicable, and it's like a linear thing. So like you can take your car, you can disassemble every part and then look at everything, put it all back together, and it's gonna, and all the fluids, and then it's gonna work fine, right? That's complicated. But complexity is basically like anything where humans involved. It's a complex situation, and that's where we get into the complex and chaotic environments that you and I saw in our careers. Like that is where you get into the heart and the gut. And um, for my master's thesis, when I looked at ground force commander decision making, um, one of the big findings, like I had like three big findings, and one of them was vicarious experience. And so I broke that down as, you can be reading memoirs about people, because when you read a memoir, you're able to like live another life. And so you're able to like read somebody that, a leader that was in a hard situation, was making hard decisions, and you can like learn from their process, and kind of like the case study model. And so reading memoirs, and then the other is like you're just watching other decision makers. Like so, like for us, that would be you're a young officer, you're sitting in a jock, you're watching the troop commanders brief the commander, you're listening to them on target over the radio, you're watching them on ISR, and you're seeing how they navigated the situations they did. So I think building up that database of like implicit understanding from vicarious experience is one way to do it.
Well, it's the way kids learn, right? I mean, then presumably, although it's sometimes the opposite, it seems, that is usually the way kids are designed to learn. They look at what you do, they look at how you solve problems. If you're successful, presumably they'll
Yeah.
mimic them. Or if you're like my kids, you'll often just do the opposite just to find out if dad was an
Yes,
idiot or if just magically it worked the other way.
he
But
was.
that's part of the that's part of the experience. But no, that makes sense. So does that to me sounds like simple and complicated. When I picture, let's say, okay, a simple decision, maybe let's just take simple off the table, but at a complicated decision, you're going to, let's say you're an apprentice to a mechanic and you're going to go
Mhm.
study the basics of mechanics. You're going to thumb through the book. You're going to learn enough about this that you can make a complicated problem. What would be a complicated problem for me, a simple problem for you, right? So you're going to reduce the difficulty of that problem by acquiring knowledge, by acquiring experience, and just by having a pretty good sense of the problem because you're very familiar with it,
Mhm.
which is a lot of what we just described earlier when we were talking about, shooting. It's the same kind of thing. You're going to make what could be really challenging relatively simple by just learning. And so that makes sense. But then you get into complexity and that doesn't work anymore, right? Is that kind of where we're going?
Yeah, so you have to really you're encountering like very unique, like one of a kind situations. So you're gonna have to take your bank of experience and like what you've seen before, and apply that to a very unique situation. And so like to jump to the chaotic, you're just total you're it's like instinctive like decisions, like you're in crisis management at that point. So and that's from our line of work, that was why we had like SOPs for contingencies, like mind
Mm-hmm.
strike, whatever. Like you go into it, you don't even there's
Parachuting
no.
emergency procedures. It's a checklist.
Yes,
Just
yeah,
do
that's
it.
a
Do the
perfect,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
perfect example. Yeah. So the chaotic environment, you're just drilling pre-planned responses to make them intuitive. But the complicated, the complex, that is where a lot comes in, and that's maybe you're seeking other, counsel from other people, and you're like, hey, listen, like, can I get another set of eyes on this problem? Like, what are you thinking, man? Have you seen anything like this? So that could be huge. At the end of the day, like, you're still going to have to make the decision, but getting other perspectives can help inform your own.
So that makes sense. I like the idea of soliciting other perspectives on it. But as you describe it, I almost picture it as kind of a circle where when you get complex enough, the decision making moves back from, well, let's take some data, let's really chew on this and figure it out. As you get more into complexity, it almost seems like it kind of loops back into the simple, where you're really relying a lot on kind of uh, the established judgment that you've already got, that you really got to fall back on knowledge because you just can't pick the problem apart enough to get at it anymore. And if you solicit a
Mhm.
bunch more input, you can do that for a little bit, but in the end, you're never going to be able to capture enough aspects of that complex problem to really make it solvable. And so you almost have
Mhm.
to go back to what you described. I don't remember his name, but the kind of simpler heuristic. Like, well,
Yeah.
it's kind of like I tell my kids, like, all right, in any given situation, just don't be a jerk. All right. You don't need to pick apart the factors too much. Just walk into it, assuming the other person's probably generally a decent person with trying to do the right thing, and don't be a jerk yourself. And that will actually get
Mhm.
you a long way in really complicated interpersonal situations. And so is there validity to that? Like, can you actually apply simpler decision making to a really, really complex problem and maybe get better results than by trying to break it down to its component parts too much? Or is that just winging it? It's actually kind of too loosey goosey and doesn't work.
No, I mean, I think, yeah, you can. Those are kind of like first principles thinking. You can definitely have those as scaffolding and framing for your decision making process. But I think you're still, they're still probably going to not totally match you to where you need to go, but they'll get you like you're on paper, you're in the eight ring, you're moving closer, and then I think the rest of it, like you're going to kind of have to follow. You're going to have to look at all three of those domains. You're going to have to like try to analyze
Yeah.
things, cold hard, rationality, brutal honesty. Then you're going to be like, what do I want to see here? What do I want this to be? And then invariably, like there'll be like some things you're gonna be able to pick up on the intuitive level, where you're like, like I'm seeing, it was like whatever the you saw some stuff that gave you like some red flags at the intuitive level.
You just got a bad feeling about this. Like, I got a bad feeling about this. I'm just not going to do that because I have some sense. Now, see, that's a funny one. I want to spend a little time on intuition because I consider
Mm-hmm.
intuition and prayer similar in the way that sometimes we interpret and internalize those. And so I'm not talking about what's at the end there in the prayer. I'm just talking about the message we receive. And I think it's difficult to teach yourself to use whatever intuition and prayer generate within you, and not to confuse those with just want. So those three things, to me, intuition, prayer, let's put on one side, want on the other, it can be really difficult to suss out what we're getting. So I go with my intuition all the time. I have my gut's telling me to do this. I think I'm just going to go with this. It could be very easy to just be when you pick that apart, be like, actually, that's what I want. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with
Mm-hmm.
what's a good decision. And so getting the answer to a prayer that sounds a lot like, okay, how about this? Let me rephrase it this way. I think that when you either pray or trust your intuition and you get a response that is too close to the thing that you probably want anyway, that is a time when you must exercise a degree of caution to kind of pick that apart and be like, am I interpreting my intuition correctly, or am I
Right.
biased toward just doing what I wanted to do anyway? That's one of those traps that, as you're talking about it, just pops into my head and probably worth
Yeah.
picking apart a little.
So yes, and I think that's a very dangerous thing that you're pointing to because um, we are so Jonathan Vervaeke talks about like humans are like the very mechanism that makes us so creative and innovative is the same thing that makes us prone to self-deception, and that's
Mm,
like, and
self
somebody else
deception.
has a good quote like you know you mustn't dude, I'm gonna totally butcher this quote, but it's basically about like getting fooled, and we yourself is like the easiest person to fool basically. So that's something that we definitely, yes. And so you're to your point, if I'm like, oh, my gut is saying I should like eat this bag of Twinkies, like I gotta be like, wait a second, like hang on, let me take a pause, so you should exercise, kind of double the introspection if your gut is leading you towards the decision that you prefer. I think that's like I think that's what you said, and like that definitely like that I agree with that. But I do think there's still a big place for intuition in a lot of our decision making. It's just tough to find the discernment to understand when to trust a gut, when to be cold hard facts. Like it's that takes it just takes experience to get to that level of to discern the difference.
Yeah, that's just true, right? I think that's whatever wisdom is, I think that's got to be what it is being able to understand your own tools, your own strengths, and to be able to apply those both intelligently and kind of judiciously in a way that kind of makes sense over time, right? That's got to be it. But you touched on something huge with self-deception, and it's stuck in my head several times when I was thinking about what would I say to someone who is asking what the positive qualities, what's the best way to make decision making. To me, the avoidance of self-deception, it's kind of like when you talk objectivity and subjectivity, the ability to dismiss kind of subjectivity and become fully objective about a situation, and the ability to avoid self-deception are two absolutely critical faculties that you have to be able to develop in yourself, right? You have to, if you want to be a good decision maker, be able to not ignore your own wants. That's not what subjectivity means, though. Objectivity really means to see the situation cleanly, to take your own biases out of it, and to be able to see it objectively. I think, to me, that's not really a golden mean kind of situation. Actually, kind of like with self-deception, you should just be 100% on the side of no self-deception. You are always honest with yourself and understanding what's going on inside of you, and no subjectivity, in the sense that your perception of what's going on is as close to unbiased and as close to objective as can be. Now, I don't think you can hit 100% in either of those. I'm not saying that but you should strive toward, I believe, the fully kind of objective and not kind of in the middle on those.
Yeah, I struggle with that because I don't know, like, somebody else says, there's no view from nowhere, right? Like, there's no magical, like, you're levitating above the
You're the
situation.
narrator. You are the narrator in the situation. But you should try to be, right? You should try to be the narrator in the situation. You should try to be omniscient, understand all of, because a truly objective viewpoint should incorporate the other people's sorts of perspectives as well. And so as much as possible, you should understand the situation cleanly with all the parties' perceptions as best you can.
Yes, I'm striving to be objective, but I know that all of us are bound by biases, and so it's like, so I'm with you. I am the fox. I'm not the hedgehog, right? Like, I'm always looking to make like a multidisciplinary, multi-intelligence sourced decision. And that's not always easy because you're just going to piss people off everywhere. Because they're like, why don't you see things the way I do? Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And so I just yes, I agree with you in the sense that, like, we should try to be like sages. That's an aspiration that's like not going to,
it's an aspiration,
get there,
yes.
But we should try to be sage-like. Yes, I'm with you.
But in the world of the golden mean, when we so often bring up the golden mean and what we're striving for, this just seems like, to me, a situation where the golden mean, it's not a golden mean situation. You should strive to be as far on that side as you can get. It doesn't mean you can get 100% to where you need to be or would like to be, but you should try to remove your own bias from the situation and see the things as objectively as possible, or at least to understand everyone's bias equally. To me, I don't know. Am I off there?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a situation where, like, you're a leader and you're making a decision that's going to impact a lot of people, like, or it's going to impact your family, it's going to impact other people. Like, yes, you should try to, like, not be selfish or subjective about it.
Well, even your own nutrition. What should I eat for lunch today, right? I should move toward an objective thinking about what I should eat for lunch today. Like, nah, man, I just want some Twinkies. To use your analogy from earlier, I just want them. I want Twinkies. I think Twinkies would be the best thing for me. Like, do you? Are you really taking the situation holistically? Does this meet any of your other goals in life? Does this lead toward anything you want to do? Like, or are you just kind of wallowing over in the subjective side? I'm just seeing it the way I want to see it right now. I know. I completely agree with you that the idea that we're going to get to a complete achieve complete self-honesty or completely see the world objectively, try as we might, probably not going to make it. But I think as people who are looking to make the best decisions, we got to strive for it, right? We got to aim for those two.
Yes, I mean, I think we can improve in that avenue.
It's maybe get as close as we can. Let's summarize some of what we talked about. So we've talked about, well, how do you make a good decision, right? How do we avoid the deer wars? How do we avoid getting on the bus to Abilene, for example, which is another
Oh, yes.
super great one on that. Nobody knows why we're on the bus. We all don't want to go to Abilene, but
So,
here
all
we
right,
are at
yeah.
Abilene.
So let's break that down real quick. So, the story I heard was like the road to Abilene, or it's like the Abilene paradox, and it's based on a young couple, and they're with like the wife's mom and dad, right? So there's four of them, and somehow they're talking like, "Hey, what are we gonna do for lunch? Whatever. Let's do." And one of the four, just like, "We can go to Abilene for lunch. Check it out." And then it became like, "Oh, okay, cool." Like there was this like mild agreement. They get in the car, they're going, and like it's hot, it's dusty, it's nasty. They get to the luncheon, it's not that great. It's all like soggy lettuce, it's just no good. And they get in the car to go home, and they're like, one of them's like, "Yo, I didn't. We shouldn't have went to Abilene." Like, And then everyone's like, "Well, I never wanted to go to Abilene. Like, I only went because you wanted to go." And it just became like no one wanted to go to Abilene, but you ended up in Abilene, and it was awful. It was just a bad time.
It's the groupthink problem, right? It's this idea that
Yeah.
somehow we can all arrive in a situation that is worse than any of us would have made. If any of us had done one thing that we wanted to do, it would have been better than all of us doing the thing none of us wanted to do. It's kind of a different side of decision making, and it's certainly like a group side of it. But man, how often do we fall into those traps where
Mm.
we end up going somewhere that none of us really wanted to be? But I don't know. We never really gave it much thought, I guess.
Yeah. It just started getting momentum, and it just went that way.
It just kind of went that way, like the GWAT.
But anyways, moving on.
Oh,
All
too
right.
dark, too dark. Oh no, it was only my entire adult life. So
This this is surf and turf after dark, so
so
it's good.
it does sometimes feel like Afghanistan went that way a little bit, doesn't it? It's just, well, let's go to Abilene for lunch. Here
It's
we are. But
yeah,
maybe
it's
we don't dig. Maybe that's too dark for this episode.
that's
I don't know.
we don't have the time to get into
It is too late.
this
But let us circle
alleyway.
back. Let
Okay.
us try and summarize decision making, because I think we actually covered a lot of ground. So we started off. We're trying to figure out how do we make these good decisions. I rattle off some kind of boneheaded bipolar stuff, and you're like, no, tripolar, right? Head, gut, heart. Okay, that resonates. I like it. So let's pick those apart. We get into head, and we start figuring out, well, head, the scientific method, kind of empirical analysis, that's good for some things and it's great for some things, but it's not everything. And so, do we move away from that? Well, no, we don't move away from it all the way, but we ensure that we've bounded it properly. We're like, okay, this is where the head's good at making decisions. Now let's look at kind of heart and gut. Well, we look at heart and gut. We think, well, am I trained in my intuition enough to trust this kind of my gut? Oh, I'm gonna take my gut. I'm gonna do this. We've talked about the complexity of problems that sometimes you just got to go with your gut because you trained enough on it. But is there a danger in that? Is there this danger that if I'm doing things I want, I'm gonna fall into the trap of mistaking intuition and confusing intuition and desire? Like,
And so, I'm glad that you just brought that up, and because to for the intuition to work, it has to have like this like unconscious database of like information to pull from.
mm-hmm,
So like the surgeon sees something, a little nick, whatever. He's looking back on like the 20,000 hours that he's done to make the intuitive decision. So you're absolutely right. Like if you don't have that database in your head, like your intuition may like lead you astray.
and as you said, the way we develop that intuition is by watching people who we think make good decisions in those situations and start, I think, to a degree, just automatically. Your brain is kind of a pattern machine. It'll regurgitate patterns. It'll pick apart patterns, and you're like, okay, I see that in this nuanced situation, this is the decision. I understand that that is good. And when you do that 1,000 times, either through experiencing it yourself or watching people that you think also make good decisions or have a track record make good decisions, you can slowly form the sort of intuition that you can trust to say, this isn't just because I want it. This is actually the best decision. And when you combine that with a sort of more head-driven, okay, I'm going to empirically break this down, I'm going to really understand this problem, then I think you can get a really powerful decision-making ability out of that, particularly if you can combine it with the ability to avoid self-deception, which is something we all struggle with, and to see things kind of objectively, to make sure that we're not cherry-picking our data, which is a horrible party foul in the head-based empirical world. Don't cherry-pick. Understand that you need to be, well, objective, And if you can combine all that, you can end up with a really powerful ability to make decisions and achieve this kind of self mastery that we're kind of all looking for. Was that how we could kind of roll this up nicely and say that that's good decision making?
That was a really good summary, and then definitely, I want to come back to McGilchrist's theory on the brain hemispheres. I think it's very important. I think it really explains a lot of the problems that we're seeing today.
Let's pick that apart then. Let's talk about maybe next episode, maybe next week. Let's talk about the results of decision making that we're seeing kind of across the world, and how maybe some of those decisions could be improved. Maybe some of the problems that we're seeing in the world could be improved if we had a slightly better understanding of this. So maybe let's take a vignette approach. Let's look at a couple of things that we're seeing and saying, all right, is this a case when we're all collectively making good decisions, or is this a case when we're kind of suffering from either self-deception, or we're kind of focusing way too much on that right brain approach or left brain approach? Let's do that. Let's just find a few vignettes this week. I'm sure we'll stumble across them in our daily lives.
It's really slow lately, so I don't think we're probably not going to be able to find any.
There's definitely no problems. I mean, yeah, there's definitely no problems that we can come up with. But let's do that. That sounds fun. Let's pick that apart next week and see where it goes. And you'll be home. You won't be in the women's bathroom anymore. That'll be good.
I will be. Where will I be? I may be home. We'll see. I may be burgling buildings.
Burgling. Sure. That's a great word. Great
awesome.
word.
Well, I may be jumping on the trains next week. Train hopping.
Great. That's great. That's a man, the man of constant sorrows. It's good. We're in brother, where art thou? And on that note, let us end it for this Friday night, man. And I will talk to you soon.